authorities. Attending meetings of the COP, the Standing Committee and the Animals and Plants Committee has repeatedly confirmed to me one thing. The CITES community is made up of committed, passionate, constructive people, all using their skills, expertise and experience to achieve our shared goal. To ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten their survival in the wild. It's lovely to see all of your faces and be with you again. This was an unusual intercessional period. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of the parties and the observers, as well as the Secretariat, in ensuring that we could progress our most important tasks while the pandemic kept us physically separated. It's because of that commitment that we have this ambitious working program before us today. Over the next 2 weeks, we will discuss and debate a broad-ranging program, from administration and the all-important budget to illegal trade in rhinos, pangolins, jaguars, timbers and seahorses, to what role CITES should play in the global efforts to reduce the risk of zoonotic disease spillover. We'll also consider how to promote gender equality and gender mainstreaming in CITES. Many documents for consideration by CoP19 address the issue of sustainable use of wildlife and the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, and I look forward to discussions about the best ways to engage and learn from communities living with wildlife. Connected to this will be discussions about the need to identify alternative sources of funding for wildlife conservation, whether it be via use of wildlife products or some other means. I believe everyone in this room would agree with me that much more funding for conservation is needed, and we as the CITES community have a role in finding ways to achieve this. We will also discuss core implementation matters related to the issuance of permits and certificates, wildlife crime enforcement and capacity building. We'll revisit the issues of management of stockpiles, of trade in ivory and live elephants, of trade in plants and timber species. And we'll consider what data and information we need to support the implementation of CITES, whether it be reporting holistically on global trade or specific reports on species trade. And that's a very brief summary. It's been observed by many that the agenda of our meetings and the work directed to the permanent committees, to parties and to others, and to the Secretariat continues to grow. The agenda at this meeting is again large and complex, reflecting emerging issues as well as long-standing matters central to the implementation of CITES. It's my hope that we can spend the next 2 weeks together working pragmatically to ensure that the program of work we set ourselves for the next 3 years is one that we can be confident that we can effectively implement. I'm not saying that we should not be ambitious. Indeed, we are always ambitious and we should be, given the responsibility that we hold. I'm simply offering a reminder that we do ourselves and wildlife no more of a service by agreeing work that we cannot do. With that said, my job is to preside independently over the sessions of Committee 2 to ensure that we get through our working program and act in accordance with the rules of procedure of the COP. I'm Australian, so I will aim to bring an Australian sense of humour and positivity to this meeting. But if I need to, I will be firm, and I might need to take some hard decisions. I aim to keep to time in accordance with the working program that the Secretariat and I have prepared, which you'll find at Agenda Item 3 with the revised version 2, published overnight. With this in mind, one of my biggest requests of you is that you keep your interventions brief and focused on the matter at hand. It's not my intention to set a time limit on interventions by parties or observers right from the start, but I might need to propose to if we begin to slip in our program. I also intend to ensure that observers are afforded a good amount of time to speak. In my view, observers are an extremely valuable part of our community, and I'd like to ensure their comprehensive participation. With that request in mind, I'd ask you to all work with your colleagues in making joint statements if you can, both for party and observer organisations. And on a similar note, if you intend to propose significant language amendments, the Secretary and I would appreciate you sending us those in writing where you can. Many of our working documents have been submitted by multiple parties, and I'd ask in those cases that you organise yourselves well ahead of time as to which party will introduce the document. And if possible ahead of time, please approach me or the Secretariat to advise us so we can call on you directly. I'd also ask that you arrive on time for our sessions. In fact, my request is that you arrive early, 15 minutes before our sessions, take your seats, and for parties to insert your voting cards in the machine so I can determine the quorum. We need to do a little bit better tomorrow than we did today. I'll aim to start immediately upon the quorum being met. I will form working groups in this committee on matters that I think are better worked on outside of this room. I will inform you as soon as I've decided that a working group is likely to be required, so I'll ask for your understanding if I decide to limit detailed language debate in this forum so it can be taken up in the working groups. One thing about Committee 2 is that in comparison to Committee 1, we spend a lot of time working on words, and that's not always easy in this big group. A reminder that yesterday in our morning plenary session, the COP agreed to a number of amendments to the working program. I've highlighted there is a Rev 2 published overnight. So those are, firstly, the COP agreed to the request of Madagascar to move discussion on document 29.3 on Malagasy ebonies and palisanders and rosewoods from Thursday, 17 November to Wednesday, 23 November. The COP agreed to the proposal by Gabon to move discussions of document 21 on the review of the CITES program and document 22 on MIC and CITES programs until after we've completed our discussions on document 66.3 and 66.7. The COP agreed to move discussions on document 87.1 on proposed amendments to resolution COP 9.24, document 44.1 on review of resolution COP 1119, and document 44.2 on identification of timber and other wood products to the working program for Committee 1. And finally, we have moved Asian big cats up to Friday. I'd like to acknowledge again that the enormous amount of work that's already been done in preparation for this meeting. I know as well as you do that a COP is not merely 2 weeks of work, but it's months and years in the making for all of us. Please know I'm keenly aware of your efforts and the significance of many of these issues to your countries, to your people, and to the species that we're stewards of. I'm also aware that this work is not done solely by the people in this building, but we're also well supported by our teams at home and our support systems. So a special acknowledgement and thank you to those important people who are not here in Panama with us, some of whom I'm sure are watching us online now. Also, our thanks to those in this building working out of sight of many of us, the interpreters, the technicians, the staff of the Panama Convention Centre, police security, and the other local staff who are essential in ensuring this meeting can operate smoothly. So with that, Committee 2, it's my pleasure to open the first session of Committee 2 at the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to CITES. So we're going to do some housekeeping first up, and then I think we're going to test the voting machine. So if everyone can just make sure you're ready to do that, I'll ask the Secretariat to give us some housekeeping messages.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. From my side, just a few housekeeping announcements. First of all, don't forget your voting card in the microphone, please. Make sure that you do take it with you when we're done with this session. And keep it safe. For the observers, please do not switch your nameplates. Your microphone is mapped against your organization's name and your placement in the room. So please do not make any changes or swap with a colleague because otherwise we will not be able to register you as you request for the floor. In terms of other matters for side events, we would like to kindly request all organizers of side events to not make any changes to the setup of the rooms in which your side event takes place. The rooms are mainly used for the meeting, including for working groups, and if any changes are made, it means that we have to rearrange the room again so that we're ready for a working group. So please do not make any changes to the setup of the rooms while you have your side event. We noticed that there are quite long queues for lunches, and the Panama Convention Center have indicated that they have a system in place where you can pre-order your lunch. So in America 1, in the foyer lunch area, as well as in Canal 1, You are able to go in the mornings, place your order, and keep your receipt that you can then use during lunchtime to avoid the queues. So please make use of this arrangement so that you don't have to waste time queuing during lunchtime for your lunch. So you can pre-order and pay for your lunch in the mornings when you come in. We've had some inquiries about lost and found. So any items that are left somewhere will be taken to the information booth. The information booth is as you enter the Panama Convention Center. To your right, there's a built-in section where the host country distributed the nice blue bags that you received. That's the information booth. So if you have lost anything, please go to the information booth to retrieve your items. And then last but not least, we would like to remind everyone to please have a look at the COVID-19 preventative measures that have been published on the CITES website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I'll now turn to the technicians to see if we're ready. Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to test the voting machines. You will have noticed the instructions circulating on the board above me. I'm going to propose a non-serious topic for our first vote so that we can just test the machines. And so the matter we will be voting on is, have you had more than 2 cups of coffee this morning? If you have had more than 2 cups of coffee this morning, your vote is yes. If you have had less than 2 cups of coffee this morning, if you've had, maybe I'll be clear. If you've had 2 or more cups of coffee this morning, your vote is yes. If you've had less than 2 cups of coffee this morning, your vote is no. If you don't wish to cast a vote, you may abstain. So this is a vote for the Chair's coffee item. Ordinarily, I would give you a proposal number, the document number. The voting type is by normal vote. And the vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. So I hope the EU is aware of everyone's coffee consumption this morning. Since this is a vote on a substantive matter, the decision will be adopted by a 2/3 majority. Thank you, technicians. Party, you have 40 seconds to cast your vote. The ballot's open now. Thank you, parties. The vote's now closed. Before I go to the technicians, the Philippines, you asked for the floor. Philippines, you have the floor. Philippines, can I confirm you don't want the floor? Thank you, Philippines.
Should I go and tell her?
Thank you, parties. We're going to take another vote on the same matter in a few minutes. Parties, your individual votes. Parties, your individual votes are on the screen now. Okay, thank you, technicians. Zambia, you've asked for the floor. Zambia, you have the floor.
No, thank you very much, Chair. The screen was a little bit too fast. We didn't check if at all our vote was successful.
Technicians, can we show the individual votes again, please? Thank you, technicians. I have Guatemala asking for the floor. Guatemala, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Guatemala tampoco ha podido observar su voto en pantalla. Gracias.
Technicians, may we have the individual votes again, please? We'll do this for a few minutes, so if everyone can just, if your concerns are that you want to see your individual votes, please just, we'll do it for a little while and then I'll come back, and if your concerns are addressed, please press your button again and that will take you off the speaker list. Cyprus, you've asked for the floor. Cyprus, you have the floor.
Sorry, it was a mistake.
Thank you, Cyprus. Next, I have Japan requesting the floor. Japan, you have the floor.
I'm afraid we cannot really see the screen. I'm sorry. It may be a technical problem, but it changes so quickly, and the letters are so small. Because this is an important issue, I just would like to ask you for some improvement, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I might just have the technicians consider that, and we'll come back. Next, I have the United Kingdom asking for the floor. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small suggestion I wonder that might help. They don't appear to be coming up in anything like alphabetical order, and I think that really helps parties find their place on the screen. So if that's possible, I suspect the speed issue perhaps disappears, and it's easier to see where we are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. We noted the same from the podium. And then I have Panama requesting the floor. Panama, you have the floor.
Sí, gracias, señora presidenta. Panamá no pudo emitir el voto de sí o no porque la pantalla no se reflejó al momento que nos permitió. Entonces, por eso Panamá no sale sí o no. Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Panama. The Secretariat will come and assist you. So, seeing no requests for the floor on the technical issues we've been dealing with this morning, I'd like to turn to our working program. The first matter on the agenda is administrative and financial matters, starting with item 7, administration, finance and budget of the Secretariat and of meetings of the Conference of the Parties. Our first document is document 7.1. This document has been submitted by the Secretariat, and I'd like to invite the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Gracias, Señora Presidenta. Buenos días. The document 7.1 contains the report of the Secretariat on the administration of the Secretariat. Since March 2019, a contribution agreement has been in place between the Secretariat and the Government of Switzerland on convention support and includes an annual contribution of 1 million Swiss franc or a total of 4 million Swiss franc during the period 2019-2022. The Secretariat is happy to report that a new arrangement has been signed on the 25th of October 2022 between the Government of Switzerland and the CITES Secretariat on the continued convention support of 1 million Swiss franc for the next 4 years, or the years 2023 to 2026. During the period since CoP19 in August 2019 and until today, the Secretariat has finalized 16 recruitment cases for staff funded from the core and the external trust funds, and 8 interns. It should also be noted that all core-funded positions are fully encumbered. Currently, the Secretariat is working on 1 recruitment case with the MIC team in Nairobi, which we are expecting to be finalizing in early next year. The Secretariat is expressing its deep gratitude to parties for their contributions to the core trust fund and to those donors that have enabled the Secretariat to employ additional staff resources for the voluntary external trust fund. Since August 2019, or the CoP18 meeting, several administrative changes have been proposed by UNEP, and the following items are some of the major administrative changes that has been introduced or implemented by UNEP. The program support policy on its allocation and usage. A note prepared by UNEP on this allocation and usage is contained in this report in Annex 1 and includes breakdown of core indirect costs covered by UNEP and common direct costs proposed to be covered by the CITES Secretariat. Another item is also the new delegation or authority on policy and a framework for the management and administration of multilateral environmental agreements. MEA secretariats that are administered by UNEP have been involved in this review of the new delegation policy and framework. And the final version that was issued by the UNEP Executive Director was effective from the 15th of September 2021. The most significant changes compared to the earlier one from 2016 is related to the human resources matters, usage of legal instruments, signing of contribution agreements, and the preparation of financial reports to donors. In line with the paragraph 38 of the Financial Resolution 18.1 on financing and costed program of work for the Secretariat for the triennium 2020 to 2022, an audit of the Secretariat was done during the period January to June last year, 2021. The audit covered the period 1st of January 2018 to 31st of December 2020 and included the following 3 areas: strategic management and governance, operations management, and finance and administration. The audit showed that there was a need for further strengthening internal controls in the areas of strategic management, operations, finance, and administration. OIOS made 9 recommendations to address these issues identified during the audit. The full report of the OIOS audit with the recommendations and management comments on those was contained in the Standing Committee Document 74, Document 10.1. The Conference of the Parties is invited to take note of this report. Madam Chair, this will end my briefing on this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. So as the Secretariat has indicated, the Conference of the Parties is invited to take note of this report. I'd like to open the floor for parties. I don't see any parties asking for the floor. I'd like to open the floor to non-parties and to observers for any comment on this paper. Not seeing any calls for the floor. Committee to notes the report and recommends that the COP notes the report. Turning to document 7.2, report of the Executive Director of UNEP on administrative matters. This document has been submitted by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP. UNEP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from the UNEP Executive Director, Ms. Inger Andersen. I take this opportunity to present the report on administrative matters as set out in document 7.2 to this meeting. The report highlights the continued dialogue and information sharing between the senior management teams of UNEP and the multilateral environmental agreements. On the delegation of authority, in 2021, the CITES Secretary General formally accepted the delegation issued by the UNEP Secretary General. On the Enterprise Resource Planning System, UMOJA, the system is currently being upgraded with additional functionality in the areas of project management and management of implementing partners and reporting. The cost of managing and maintaining the system has increased as more users are added. The costs allocated to each office has in turn increased and are considered to be direct costs and are expected to be borne by each office. In the light of the UN-wide management reforms, UNEP continues to review its program support cost policy to determine the adequacy of the apportionment, the eligible costs, and the treatment of over and under expenditure of the share allocated to the MEAs. The updated policy is expected to be finalized by the end of the first quarter of 2023. On the programmatic side, UNEP and CITES are long-term partners in addressing global environmental challenges. UNEP remains committed to working with the CITES Secretariat and with the parties to ensure sustainable trade in wildlife and plants through a number of initiatives, such as the CITES Trade Database, the African Elephant Fund, and the Green Customs Initiative. UNEP acknowledges the valuable contributions of the CITES Secretariat towards the success of the resumed fifth session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, which took place in Nairobi in March 2022. At this session, a number of important resolutions relevant to the work of CITES were adopted, such as the resolution on animal welfare and biodiversity and health. In addition, a dedicated leadership dialogue with the MEAs was organized for the first time, providing an opportunity for different MEAs, including CITES, to interact with ministers and other government representatives on ways to enhance coherent implementation through integrated approaches. UNEP appreciates the excellent contributions by the CITES Secretary General in these discussions. Member states and stakeholders, including CITES, have worked tirelessly to develop an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework for adopting at the 15th session of the Conference of Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which will convene in Montreal in December 2022. UNEP has supported this process by convening 2 consultation workshops that brought together relevant MEAs and their parties to provide contributions to the development and eventual implementation of the framework. CITES has been participating actively throughout the process. More details are available in the information document submitted by UNEP to this meeting, which is the Burn 2 report, and that document is CoP19 INF 11. In closing, I would like to reiterate UNEP's commitment to supporting biodiversity-related MEAs to facilitate the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This includes UNEP's strong continued support and collaboration with CITES in the realization of its mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, UNEP, for your report. I'd like to invite parties. I don't see any parties asking for the floor, so I'd like to open the floor to non-parties and to observers. Not seeing any requests for the floor, I'd like to propose that we note the report of UNEP. The committee notes the report. Our next item is document 7.3. Financial reports for 2020 to 2022. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat in accordance with the reporting obligations in Resolution Conf 18.1 on financing and the costed program of work for the Secretariat for the triennium 2020 to 2022. I'd like to invite the Secretariat to introduce the document. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The document 7.3 on financial matters provides information on income and expenditure for the period 1st of January 2020 until 30 September 2022 for the respective trust fund of the Convention. The financial data for the years 2020 and 2021 showed an implementation rate of 78% and 96% respectively for the core trust fund. As of 30 September 2022, the overall expenditure had reached an implementation rate of 79%. A matter of concern for the Secretariat is the delay by parties in paying their annual contribution. As of 30 September this year, the overall collection rate for the first 9 months of the year was only 47.9% and included full or partial contribution of $3 million received from 84 parties out of a total 184. We are reminding parties of the Financial Resolution 18.1 and specifically the paragraph 19 to 20 that expects parties to pay their contribution to the trust fund in a timely manner as far as possible during the year prior to the one the contribution apply or promptly by the beginning of the calendar year. It should be noted that the issue of unpaid contribution is having a negative impact on the Secretariat's ability to fund daily operations as the cash balance available will be low compared to actual expenditure projected for the year. As of end of September this year, the Secretariat is now operating with a negative cash balance of nearly $2.2 million due to late or no payment at all. During the period since 2019, the Secretariat has worked actively on identifying areas for efficiency savings by using existing global or local system contracts issued by the UN headquarters in New York, by UNEP, or by UN office at Geneva duty station, UNOG, for communications, licenses, web service, or online platforms. As per the request in the Resolution Conference 18.1, the Secretariat has conducted a new survey in 2021 to complement the one that was presented to the 66th meeting of the Standing Committee in 2016 on how registration fees are applied to other MEAs and to natural resource management bodies. And this result of the survey was presented at the Standing Committee meeting 74th in March 2022. The Secretariat is proposing that the current levels of the registration fees for observer organizations and international visitors remains in place, and that a further review can be done on whether to apply registration fees for online meetings. As of end of September 2022, the collection related to a collection of registration fees for CoP19 meeting amounted to nearly 140,000. The latest figures as of yesterday is now up to 218,000. And these funds are recorded on a specific and a separate grant in our financial system, Omoja, for parties to utilize and decide on how to use it during the COP meeting. The Secretariat requests that the Conference of the Party accept this report of expenditure incurred and approve the reports of implementation of the costed program of work for the years 2020 and 2021, and partially for 2022 up to 30 of September. Madam Chair, this will end my briefing on this agenda item 7.3. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. like to open the floor to parties for comments on document 7.3. Don't see any requests for the floor from parties. Non-parties and observers, you're welcome to take the floor if you have comments on document 7.3. Not seeing any requests for the floor. The committee accepts the report of expenditures incurred and approves the report of implementation of the cost of programs of work for 2020, 2021, and partially for 2022 up to 30 September 2022. Our next item is document 7.4, Administration, Finance and Budget of the Secretariat and Meetings of the Conference of Parties, Budget and Work Program for 2023 to 2025. I'd like to ask the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As per the Financial Resolution 18.1 and after consultation at the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee, the Secretariat is proposing 3 alternative budget scenarios at this meeting. Each of the scenarios are using the UN standard salary cost for Geneva for the year 2022 when calculating the staff cost for 2023 and the following years, which represents an 10.4 increase of the overall staffing component. The 3 scenarios include the following key elements. The zero real growth scenario will maintain the current number of staff and will include an increase in the operating costs based on actual expenditures during the current period. This scenario will also include proposed adjustments on the program support costs related to the core, indirect costs covered by UNEP, and common direct costs proposed to be covered by the CITES Convention. This scenario will increase the core budget with 12.8% on average annual increase, or the average annual increase of $796,941, US dollars. Too many figures there. The second scenario is zero nominal growth. This is showing the operational budget maintained at the current level, so the current level of 2020 to 2022, in nominal terms. It's including the current level of staff and its operating costs. Please note that the UN standard salary cost for Geneva have been used when calculating the staff cost for the new triennium, and therefore this scenario represents an increase of 10.4%, or an average annual increase of 647,566. The third scenario, the incremental growth, this scenario builds on the zero real growth scenario and will include 2 posts that was funded from the fund balance as agreed upon in the CoP19 meeting in 2019, and also other new proposals related to the implementation of the program of work and the convention. This scenario will increase the overall core budget with 14.6%, or an average annual increase of US dollars. The calculation of the average annual assessed contribution of each party for the triennium 2023-2025 is based on the United Nations Scale of Assessment for 2022 to 2024, which was adopted by the General Assembly on the 24th of December last year, and is adjusted to consider that not all the member states of the United Nations are parties to this convention. The Secretariat requests the Conference of the Parties to consider the incremental growth scenario when adopting the budget for the next triennium, 2023 to 2025. Madam Chair, this will end my briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. With the indulgence of the committee, I'd like to ask the Secretary-General to make some comments.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta, y primeramente mis felicitaciones a usted por su elección. Les pido a los delegados que ofrezcan su apoyo a las presidencias de los comités. Su labor será ardua y el éxito en avanzar con eficacia a través del orden del día dependerá de la forma en que trabajen conjuntamente. Con respecto al documento COP19 7.4, señores y señoras, tendremos que abordar la cuestión de los recursos humanos y financieros de la Convención. En esta COP pueden adoptarse decisiones y directrices que se estima supondrán unos costos de alrededor $50 millones de Estados Unidos. Sé que son conscientes de que la Secretaría ha estado trabajando en una situación límite durante varios años. Vivimos tiempos de dificultades financieras a nivel mundial y, por ende, no he solicitado nuevo personal en el presupuesto propuesto. Sin embargo, si bien en el pasado la Secretaría ha procurado realizar todo el programa de trabajo a pesar de los escasos recursos, en esta COP debo pedirles que se centren en qué es lo más esencial para lograr sus responsabilidades globales. Debería reconocerse la labor realizada, deben establecerse prioridades y debe reconocerse que no podemos lograr nuestros objetivos sin asignar financiación de acuerdo con nuestras aspiraciones. Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Secretary-General. So we have before us 3 budget scenarios as prepared by the Secretariat and are annexed to a revised resolution for the forward budget 2023 to 2025. You'll be familiar that we establish a budget working group to consider the more detailed matters in the budget as prepared by the Secretariat and the other finance-related documents we have in front of us. But I'd like to open the floor to parties for some initial comments. I see Russian Federation requesting the floor. Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, Russian Federation expresses its support for the first or second of the proposed budget options, namely zero real growth or zero nominal growth. And in general, we're of the option that it's necessary to reduce costs in the categories mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation. I'd like to open the floor to observers if there are any comments on the budget. Oh, Thank you. I see Brazil asking for the floor. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor, and we wish you a very fruitful 2 weeks job. We commend the work carried out by the Secretariat in the preparation of document 7.4 and its annexes, and with regard to the various budget scenarios proposed. We are aware of the challenges that this convention will be faced for the next years. However, we also would like to draw your attention to the particular context we are facing worldwide, in which all of our countries, and particularly developing countries, are struggling to recover from the numerous difficulties arising from the pandemic. And these circumstances, in our perspective, recommend extreme caution regarding any possible increase in expenditure by countries. And for that reason, Brazil supports the adoption of budget scenario 2, zero nominal growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I see Japan requesting the floor. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for, we appreciate the efforts made by the Secretariat to prepare these 3 scenarios. The second scenario, zero nominal growth, is actually 10.40% growth. It is not zero nominal. In other MEAs, zero nominal growth means keeping exactly the same figures from the current budget year. The current triennial, the budget is $18,685,560. So this number should be kept as the same. If we pursue zero nominal growth. Zero nominal growth means the keeping the same figures from the current budget year. For this reason, Japan supports zero nominal growth, but not in this scenario. Japan supports the zero nominal growth, keeping the same figures from the current triennial. Japan is the 3rd largest donor, so that's why we have the responsibility in the clear operation of the Secretariat. And we understand this 10.4% growth is coming from the increase in staffing cost, but in other MEAs, if Secretariat prepares zero nominal growth scenario, this increase in staffing cost is absorbed in other budget lines. So we expect the Secretariat does the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. I see the United States of America, followed by Australia. United States of America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States appreciates the work of the Secretariat in developing the budget scenarios. However, we would like to support the point from Japan and point out that none of the 3 budget scenarios presented represents true zero nominal growth. The prior approved core budget for the triennium is increased by 10.4% in the most conservative budget option presented. We look forward to ongoing discussions on this issue in the Budget Working Group. Thank you.
Thank you, USA. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of Australia, as this is the first time I'm speaking to this committee, we'd like to congratulate you and say how very bloody proud we are of your election to the position of Chair. Australia would like to thank the Secretariat and the Finance, Budget Subcommittee for their work managing the budget and preparing the 3 budget scenarios under consideration. We note that the proposed incremental growth scenario represents a significant increase to the voluntary annual contribution paid by parties. However, we also recognise that the world is facing triple environmental crises, as was discussed yesterday, and that there needs to be an increase of this level at this time to support the important work of the Secretariat. As such, we would support the proposed incremental growth scenario. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. I'll just take a moment to see if there are any other parties who might like to intervene. Not seeing any other parties, and I did open the floor to observers earlier. I see Unit WCMC asking for the floor. Unit WCMC, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your election as Chair of Committee 2. UNEP WCMC would like to draw attention to Information Document 20, which provides further detail in relation to a proposed budgetary increase to keep pace with the growing maintenance requirements of the CITES trade database under the activity The Provision of Trade Monitoring Support Services 2023 to 2025. The budget for this activity has remained static for the last 2 triennia, whilst trade volumes and records have increased significantly in this time, with an associated increase in cost of managing and maintaining the CITES trade database. Given the importance of the database to supporting the implementation of the CITES Convention, and with over 1 million records a year now being processed, we request that the CITES parties favorably consider an increase for this activity to ensure that the budget keeps pace with processing and maintenance requirements of this database. We would be happy to provide further details to the Budget Working Group as might be useful and requested. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UNEP WCMC. I don't see any other requests for the floor, so I'm going to take a moment with the Secretariat to just... Oh, sorry, we see SSN requesting the floor. SSN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I recognise that it's unusual for observers to speak on budget issues, and so it's not a matter of detail on which I speak, but it's just a matter of interest. We, SSN, and I'm sure all other observers, value the CITES Convention and the work that it seeks to do and the incredible work of the Secretariat. And it seems a massive challenge that a convention that's designed to manage international global wildlife trade is so always short of funds. I would simply like to suggest that in the efforts of the Budget Working Group, there may be an accommodation made for innovative finance opportunities to be brought to the table by observers and others that could somehow try to overcome these budget challenges so that CITES can work at its maximum potential and not always be struggling to make ends meet. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, SSN. So I will just take a moment with the Secretariat to confer. Oh, I see another party, Chile. Chile, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Sí, Chile también favorece la opción de crecimiento nominal cero. Como fue señalado también por Brasil, nuestros países enfrentan grandes desafíos para poder recuperarnos después de los efectos de la pandemia y la actual situación económica también que afecta a todo el mundo, entiendo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chile. Okay, I will take that moment with the Secretariat to confer. Thank you, Committee, for that moment. So I'm going to strike the Budget Working Group now. I'll take a moment to read out the mandate, the terms of reference for that working group, and then I'll invite members of the working group from the parties. So if we're ready, the Budget Working Group will consider documents 7.1, CoP19 document 7.1, 7.2, 7.3 and 7.4, including the 3 budget scenarios prepared by the Secretariat as outlined in CoP19 Doc 7.4, and review and recommend to the committee the budget for 2023 to 2025. Seeing no objections to that, I'd like to call for members from parties for the budget working group, and I'd like you to do that by pressing your speaking button, please. Thank you, parties. We have our list for the budget working group. So I'll read out the members of the working group and then go to the logistical arrangements for the group. So I have Australia, Japan, United States of America, the United Kingdom, Kuwait, Switzerland, New Zealand, Germany, Cambodia, China. If any other parties would like to join the budget working group, please press your... Oops, someone's dropped off. I'm going to start the list again. We've just had some movement in the list. So I'll start again. I have Australia, Japan, United States of America, United Kingdom, Kuwait, Switzerland, Uganda, New Zealand. If everyone can just hold the lists and stop, the lists are changing while I'm speaking. So New Zealand, Germany, Cambodia, China, France, and the Czech Republic. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, you've added a few times and left. Does that mean you want the floor? Saudi Arabia, would you like the floor? Saudi Arabia, you have the floor to indicate what you would like.
Yeah, just to want to take a floor to confirm that Saudi Arabia would like to be a part of a group for the budget.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. We have you on our list. So that is the list of parties joining the budget working group. That budget working group will meet for the first time at 1 p.m. today in the Pacifico 1, which is down back towards the foyer and away from the canal. It will be labelled budget working group, and that group will decide on its chair during that first meeting. So 1 p.m. in Pacifico 1. So parties, you can release your speaking buttons now we have you on the lists. Argentina, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. A Argentina le gustaría participar también del grupo de trabajo, para que pueda haber alguien de la región también. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Argentina. I still have China on my list. China, do you want the floor? No. Thank you very much. All right, clear the lists. We'll now turn to document CoP19, Doc 7.5, access to funding. This document has been submitted by the Standing Committee and will be introduced by the Secretariat. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The present document, CoP19, Doc 7.5, has been submitted by the Standing Committee. The document provides an update on the implementation of decisions 18.4 through 18.11, including on the financial or technical assistance provided, including the loan of personnel services provided by the parties as of 30th of June 2022, the GEF Global Wildlife Program, and the opportunities regarding the new integrated program on wildlife conservation for development for the 8th replenishment of the Global Environment Facility, and the convening of the Wildlife Roundtable on Sustainable Use. I would like to take this opportunity to thank parties, governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations and other entities for their continued support for the implementation of the Convention, in particular, those who agreed to include the costs for administrative and financial management of funded activities in their extra budgetary contributions. On third and last point, regarding the convening of the Wildlife Roundtable, the Secretariat would like to report that the Roundtable on Sustainable Wildlife Finance for African elephant conservation took place at UNEP headquarters in Nairobi, Kenya, on 27th and 28th of October this year, which was made possible through the financial support from the European Union and the United Kingdom. Representatives from 24 African range states participated both in person and online, as well as a small number of resource persons and observers. The participants heard about recent examples of innovative financing options and exchanged information and views regarding the financial needs and challenges for wildlife conservation, with focus on African elephants. In reviewing the background study, they also discussed how to build a better business case that could attract donors and investors. Some of the main findings of the roundtable were following. Human-wildlife conflict has emerged as the priority area in need of financing. Elephant poaching has significantly declined in Eastern and Southern Africa, but remains a challenge in some other areas. Climate change appears to be contributing to greater wildlife movement in search of food and water. Scaling some of the existing financial opportunities to the smaller needs might be necessary. And participants seem to express interest in learning more about on this topic and the potential opportunities. The background study for the workshop is available as information document CoP19 Inf 14, Rev 2, in English and French, while the summary of the roundtable has just been published a few days ago as CoP19 Inf 14 Rev 2 Annex 1, and this is available in English only at the moment. As a consequence of this roundtable taking place last month, Decision 19.EE proposed in document CoP19 Doc 7.5 has effectively been implemented, and the Secretariat proposes this not be adopted. The need for parties to explore innovative means for financing their conservation efforts was also highlighted in a few other working documents at this present meeting, including CoP19 Doc 66.2.2, submitted by Kenya, which is scheduled to be discussed on Thursday, 17th of November. In light of this, and taking into account the outcomes of the roundtable, the Secretariat proposes that a new set of decisions under the title Sustainable Financing for Wildlife Conservation be considered by this Conference of the Parties in order to continue the exploratory work. As noted in paragraph C of the comments of the Secretariat in the present document, draft decisions 19.BB and 19.CC that have been proposed by the Standing Committee were already incorporated into the draft decision, a draft resolution on financing and the costed program of work for the Secretariat for the triennium 2023 to 2025. The Secretariat therefore recommends that they not be adopted by the Conference of the Parties. In conclusion, Chair, parties are invited to consider the draft decisions on access to funding found in Annex 1 of the present document. Parties may want to consider the comments of the Secretariat and not consider draft decisions 19.BB, CC, and EE, and also consider the proposed new decisions on sustainable financing for wildlife conservation found in paragraph E of the Secretariat's comments. Finally, the Secretariat would like to draw your attention that these new proposed decisions on sustainable financing for wildlife conservation will be revisited on Thursday, 17th of November, under the agenda item 66.2.2 for any further amendments in light of the discussions on that day. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So we have been asked to adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 1, noting the comments of the Secretariat on their views about the implementation of several of those decisions and their new proposed decisions on sustainable financing for wildlife conservation. I'd like to invite parties for comments on document 7.5. I see the United States of America. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your election as Chair. The United States supports the adoption of the draft decisions with minor edits to 19.AA and agrees that the administration of externally funded projects should not overburden or interfere with the Secretariat's core functions. We disagree with the Secretariat's suggestion to delete 19.CC and 19.DD, and we support the Secretariat's suggestion to delete decisions 18.5 to 18.11, as we agree that they have been replaced by the new draft decisions. With respect to 19.AA, we request the insertion of, quote, comma, in line with existing JEF procedures and guidelines, end quote, in 19...
I'm sorry, United States, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just give us a geographical location within the decision?
Yes.
Before you read your language, thank you.
Apologies, I had it right after, but I should put it before. 19.AAB. So the insertion of and this is right after So contribute to the development and implementation of GEF projects. Right after that, comma, in line with existing GEF procedures and guidelines, comma. And we would also request the deletion in 19.AAC, resources for, right after, under the 8th replenishment of. With respect to the Secretariat's comments regarding, recommending new decisions, 19.AA and 19.BB on sustainable financing for wildlife conservation. While we generally support the new draft decisions, we note that this was a recent update to the document and we appreciate the additional time to consider it before the end of the meeting. And we also agree that 19.EE has been implemented and can be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. The floor is still open to other parties for comments. Seeing no more comments from parties, I'll briefly open the floor for observers if there are any comments. Oh, I see. Actually, Peru has asked for the floor. Peru, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora Presidente, por otorgarnos la palabra. Felicitamos su designación y le auguramos muchos éxitos en estas 2 arduas semanas. Perú agradece a la Secretaría por la preparación del presente documento y apoya los proyectos de decisión que figuran en el anexo 1 del documento. Asimismo, Perú manifiesta su interés en participar en las reuniones vinculadas con la promoción del uso sostenible de las especies silvestres, tal como se refiere en el proyecto de decisión 19EE, previa aclaración del término donantes sobre la vida silvestre. Por otro lado, habida cuenta de los casos exitosos de proyectos aprobados en la región, manifestar el interés para recibir asistencia técnica de la Secretaría en la aplicación del Fondo para el Medio Ambiente Mundial Nacionales. Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Peru. I see that the World Bank has asked for the floor. World Bank, you have the floor.
Thank you. We just wanted to reaffirm the opportunity for parties to access GEF 8 funds to support CITES implementation. So the new GEF 8 Wildlife Conservation for Development Integrated Program will offer parties the opportunity to use GEF funds to combat illegal wildlife trade, to develop sustainable financing opportunities for wildlife conservation, to prevent and mitigate human-wildlife conflict, and to reduce potential risks of zoonotic spillover. The GEF 8 program will be open to all GEF-eligible countries across all regions, and it will cover terrestrial, freshwater, and marine wildlife. So there are a range of potential synergies with CITES decisions and resolutions depending on national contexts and priorities. Entry to the program will be by a competitive expression of interest process for countries, which is expected to take place in January. Interested parties are encouraged to engage in their national GEF prioritization process, which is coordinated by the GEF operational focal point. If you're interested to know more, you could also join us at our Global Wildlife Program site event tomorrow. We will provide more details on the GEF 8 program, as well as showcase some parties' current action under the existing Global Wildlife Program. The site event is taking place tomorrow at lunchtime in this room, so we invite all those interested in GEF 8 to join us tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, World Bank. I'm sure there'll be lots of parties interested in your side event lunchtime tomorrow in this room. So, seeing no further requests for the floor, we've heard from the United States that they support the adoption of the decisions in Annex 1 with some minor amendments to Decision 19AA little b and little c. They don't support the deletion of any other decisions in Annex 1, but they have supported the recommendation of the Secretariat, which is to delete decisions 18.5 to 18.11 as they're replaced by the new decisions. Thank you, and the Secretariat has reminded me they supported the deletion of 19EE. And we had the comment that the new draft decisions on sustainable financing for wildlife conservation will be useful to be discussed further. So with that, I think that we adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1 as amended by the United States. So we're looking at decision 18.4, 19AA as amended, BB, 19CC, and 19DD. We'll now move to CoP19 Doc 7.6 on the Sponsored Delegates project. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat, and I'll ask the Secretariat to introduce it. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, good morning. I'm speaking to document CoP19 Doc 7.6 on the Sponsored Delegates project. The aim of the Sponsored Delegates project is to provide support to developing country parties to ensure that they are represented at the Conference of the Parties. The project is established in Resolution Conf 17.3, and the document reports on the implementation of the project for the present meeting of the Conference of the Parties, as well as of the implementation of Decision 18.12. For the present meeting, the Secretariat launched the project on 1st October 2021 with the aim of collecting $1 million to provide support to delegates for the present meeting. With contributions from 17 sponsors, the Secretariat raised a total of just over $500,000. On behalf of the sponsored delegates, I'd like to thank all those who provided support to the sponsors delegates, project donors, and others. This amount was unfortunately not enough to respond favorably to all the requests that were received by the Secretariat, and we therefore had to apply clear criteria to select the delegates to be sponsored. The criteria are set out on the CITES website and are a combination of the United Nations Human Development Index, the guidelines of the Development Assistance Committee of the OECD, and some CITES-specific criteria, which include membership of the permanent committees, proponent of listing proposals, and the size of the delegation at the previous COP. A total of just over 100 delegates from 64 parties were offered sponsorship, travel, and accommodation. However, we cannot yet report on the exact number of sponsored delegates, as it remains to be seen if they all make it to the meeting. So within another few days, we will publish an information document with this information. A handful of delegates were offered just the daily subsistence allowance, as funding became available too late to arrange for the travel. This underlines the importance of making funds available in good time before the meeting. As for the administration, the Secretariat notes that the project is very labor intensive, which is also described in the document. Further, it doesn't make it any simpler when parties change the names of delegates or their itinerary at the last minute. The Secretariat has made a proposal for amending the resolution to clarify that administrative cost of the project be charged to the project itself. I would like to draw the attention to Annex 3, setting out the budget estimates for the implementation of the sponsored delegates project at a total of about $1,250,000 for the next intersessional period, basically for the next conference of the parties. As for the direct support offered by other parties and organizations to delegations, the Secretariat issued notification number 74 on 18th of October this year. So far, the Secretariat has received 7 responses to this request for information. We encourage anyone who has received or provided support to let the Secretariat know as soon as possible so we can include this information in the forthcoming information document and ensure transparency around the support. With regard to the sponsored delegates project at meetings of the permanent committees, the Secretariat did receive some funding from Canada and Sweden and provided support to delegates of 5 parties concerned by Article 13 process or by the NIAP process to participate in the meeting of the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee. The Secretariat proposes to continue this practice in the next intersessional period should funding become available. Finally, the Secretariat is proposing that parties be encouraged to ensure gender balance on the delegations nominated for support under the Sponsored Delegates Project. To conclude, Madam Chair, the Secretariat recommends that the committee agrees to the 2 sets of amendments to Resolution 17.3 as set out in Annex 1 to the document. The first set of amendments is related to ensuring gender balance on the nominations for sponsorship made by parties through amended text in the preamble and in paragraphs 8 and 12. The second is to clarify that the cost of administration of the project be charged directly to the project to the extent possible. Secondly, the Secretariat recommends that the committee agrees to the decision set out in Annex 2, allowing the Secretariat, subject to external funding, to provide financial support for the participation in meetings of the Standing Committee for up to 2 delegates from developing country parties subject to an Article 13 process. Finally, the Secretariat recommends that Decision 12.12 be deleted as it has been implemented. This concludes my introduction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So we are invited to adopt the amendments to Resolution COMP 7.3 as set out in Annex 1 to the document, adopt the draft decision set out in Annex 2, and delete Decision 18.12 as it's been implemented. So I'd like to invite parties for their comments on this document. Colombia, I see you asked for the floor. Colombia, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Por ser la primera vez que mi delegación toma la palabra en este comité, quisiera felicitarla por su designación y agradecer y destacar el trabajo adelantado por la Secretaría con respecto a este proyecto de financiación de delegados. Colombia apoya la propuesta de decisión, pero quiere manifestar su insatisfacción por la falta de financiación por parte de este proyecto que permita la participación de los países en desarrollo en esta COP. Queremos resaltar que todos los países en desarrollo requerimos para contar con delegaciones con conocimiento amplio de los distintos aspectos de la Convención este apoyo y que nos permita participar de manera constructiva e informada en los debates que se presentan. Esperamos que en un futuro los donantes contribuyan de manera más significativa a este proyecto y que más países en desarrollo podamos ser beneficiarios del mismo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Colombia. I see the European Union, followed by the United States.
Thank you very much. And as we take the floor for the first time in this committee, I would, on behalf of the EU and its member states, would like to congratulate the chair on your appointment and wish you all the best in this role. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the update on the implementation of the decision 18.12. We do think it's a very important project that enables all parties to participate in the COP, and we, the EU and the member states, gladly support it. We do recognize that the expansion of the project to the Standing Committee will put additional burden on the Secretariat. However, we do agree to, as proposed, to the limited expansion of the program to eligible parties subject to Article 13 procedures. We also agree to the changes proposed in the resolution CONF 17.3. I would like also take this opportunity to urge the parties to ensure that they actually attend a conference of parties with the valid credentials when having been granted funding. And we also would like to suggest that the Secretariat keeps track of cases where this has not happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States is a supporter of the Sponsored Delegates Project, and we have been able to contribute financially to help ensure that as many parties as possible attend each meeting of the Conference of the Parties. In advance of COP19, the United States' NOAA Fisheries provided $50,000 to the Secretariat for the Sponsored Delegates Project through a grant. We also support a transparent and open funding process to ensure that all parties are aware of how each party is financially supported to attend such meetings. With respect to proposed amendments to the Resolution CONF 17.3 on the Sponsored Delegates Project, the United States appreciates the Secretariat's suggested edit to incorporate gender balance into the resolution. We also recognize the challenges associated with waiving the program support costs associated with the Sponsored Delegates Project. At the same time, instead of deleting the reference to waiving program support costs entirely, we suggest that the resolution could consider waiving the program support costs. We support adoption of draft decision 19.AA as we believe it is critically important for parties subject to an Article 13 process to be able to engage in those discussions in person at meetings of the Standing Committee. Finally, we support retaining decisions 18.12 to help ensure continued application of clear criteria to use of the Sponsored Delegate Project funds and the exploration of the provision of Sponsored Delegates Project funds to assist parties with attending the Animals Committee, Plants Committee, and Standing Committee meetings. We would also see merit in incorporating Para A of Decision 18.12 into Resolution CONF 17.3. We look forward to continuing to provide financial support to the Sponsored Delegates Project for future meetings of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. Cuba, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Al ser la primera vez que intervenimos, aprovecho la ocasión para felicitarla por su designación. El trabajo realizado por la Secretaría, así como también quisiéramos agradecer a los donantes que permitieron con su acción que determinadas delegaciones de países en vía de desarrollo estuvieran presentes. Nuestra delegación quiere sumarse a la intervención que realizó la delegación de Colombia en relación con la importancia de que todos los países en desarrollo y particularmente los pequeños estados insulares tengamos en el futuro al menos poder estar representados al menos por un delegado presencial en esta reunión. En esta ocasión no se pudo obtener financiamiento para nuestra participación y bueno, nosotros no tenemos objeciones, apoyamos los documentos que se proponen. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Cuba. Thank you, parties. I'm going to ask the Secretariat to reflect on some of the comments.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, delegates, for the comments. With respect to the proposed amendment to Resolution 17.3, on the operational paragraph 6, I would like to note that the United Nations General Assembly do not allow for waiving charges, for waiving the program support cost of 13%, which is why we have made this suggested amendment. That's just the background of that suggested amendment. With regard to decision 18.12, I understand there was a proposal to incorporate paragraph A into the resolution. We've taken note of this. And I think those were the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. So with that, I think that we adopt the amendments to Resolution COF 17.3 set out in Annex 1. We adopt the draft decision set out in Annex 2. And we will maintain Decision 18.12, noting the US's comments about considering incorporating that into the sponsored delegates resolution. With that, we'll move on to COP18 Document 8, Language Strategy for the Convention. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat at the request of the Standing Committee, and I'll ask the Standing Committee to introduce the document. I'll ask the Secretariat to introduce the document. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Le secrétariat présente ce rapport à la demande du comité permanent qui a été chargé dans la décision 18.30 d'étudier les incidences de l'ajout de l'arabe, du chinois et du russe aux langues de travail de la CITES, notamment sur l'administration, le budget et l'efficacité de la Convention. Les partis ont devant eux 4 options. Option 1, le passage aux 6 langues officielles des Nations Unies et avec une incidence budgétaire d'un peu plus de 5 millions de dollars américains. Option 2, la traduction de toutes les résolutions et des décisions valides dans les 6 langues officielles des Nations Unies. Cette option a des incidences budgétaires à hauteur de 175 000 dollars américains, tout en notant que les révisions des résolutions et aussi les nouvelles résolutions et décisions devront donc être traduites tous les 3 ans. L'option 3 est donc le passage aux 6 langues des Nations Unies pour les sessions de la COP, c'est-à-dire que les documents de la COP, mais aussi l'interprétation sera fournie dans les 6 langues. Et donc ceci a une incidence budgétaire à hauteur de 876 000 dollars américains. Et enfin, l'option 4, qui est le passage aux 6 langues des Nations Unies pour les sessions de la COP, mais aussi du comité permanent avec une incidence budgétaire à hauteur de 876 000 $ américains. Quelle que soit l'option choisie, l'incidence principale sera un meilleur accès et une meilleure compréhension de la Convention par les parties qui parlent arabe, chinois et russe. Le comité permanent n'étant pas arrivé à une conclusion sur cette question, la conférence des parties est invitée à définir une marche à suivre à partir de l'une des 4 options proposées ou à renouveler la décision en question ou à rédiger un projet de décision à l'intention du comité permanent afin de poursuivre les discussions. Merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Secretariat. Opening the floor for comments from parties, I see Kuwait. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to congratulate you on your boss. So Kuwait would like to thank the CITES Secretariat for preparing this detailed, informative and important document. As such, strategy will help the 24 Arabic-speaking countries for better understanding and implementation of the Convention. Also, a better participation during the major meetings of this Convention. And I think it is the time to consider such inclusion of the other UN working language. It is the time for the Convention to be better enforced in a wide range of countries. Furthermore, I would like to ask the committee if that subject can be moved and further discussed in the Finance and Budget Subcommittee in the next few days, so we can come back with the view and agreement of all the regions, and also looking forward to explore the 4 options present in the document and have a consensus at this conference of the party. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kuwait, and thank you for your useful suggestion about how we might consider this alongside the budget discussions. I see Bahrain, you have asked for the floor. Bahrain, you have the floor.
And congratulations on your election as chair of Committee 2. Since this is the first time the Kingdom of Bahrain is taking the floor, we would like to extend our gratitude and appreciation to Panama for the warm welcome and hospitality, as well as acknowledge the Secretariat's efforts in organizing COP19. Bahrain aligns its view with Kuwait and supports Document 8 regarding the inclusion of Arabic, Chinese, and Russian in the language strategy of the Convention. As highlighted by the document, Arabic is the official language in 24 parties, Russian is the official language in 4 parties, and Chinese is spoken by over 1.3 billion people. Including these languages is practical in that it will allow for better involvement by more parties, which will ultimately allow for greater effectiveness and implementation of the Convention. For that reason, and to be concise, we support the application of Option 2, translation of the resolutions and decisions, and/or Option 3, the translation of the COP meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahrain. I see China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing a more comprehensive and detailed report for COP19, which provides a good basis for our understanding, reflection, and further progress on this topic. As we all know, the United Nations has 6 working languages. Their equal use facilitates international exchange and cooperation. We regret that owing to historical developments, they are not used equally in this convention to date. At previous meetings, the Chinese delegation has pointed out on many occasions that the inclusion of Arabic, Chinese, and Russian as working languages of the convention will greatly promote the implementation and application of the convention, contribute to the international cause of the protection of endangered species of wild fauna and flora, and meet the requirements of the UN and other relevant efforts to promote the integration of working languages. The equal use of the working languages of the Convention is also a matter of equality.
The useful work of the Secretariat report in analyzing and contrasting the language strategies of the various convention bodies gives us a clearer picture of the situation in other conventions. However, it seems that there is a statistical error with regard to the important convention of the UNFCCC, that the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Article 29 of which stipulates that all 6 languages of the United Nations are official languages. In addition, the report lacks one of the most important international agreements adopted just a few years ago, the Paris Agreement, which also provides for 6 official languages of the United Nations in Article 29. So the basic factor is that all UN conventions provide 6 official languages. And at this stage, we support Kuwait's proposal that we should discuss this issue in the Financial and Budgetary Subcommittee and have a thorough discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, China, and I note that you've supported Kuwait's proposed way forward. I see Russian Federation has asked for the floor. Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Russian Federation stands for non-discriminatory use of the Russian language in the work of the Convention. We refer to the resolutions of the UN General Assembly 71-328 of September 11th, 2017, multilingualism, and 72-19 of December the 1st, 2017, pattern of conferences, according to which the UN system should ensure an equal distribution of material and human resources among all 6 languages of the organization. We also know that the Russian language, in addition to Russian specialists, is a working language for experts from the countries of the Commonwealth of the Independent States. We also support the proposal of Kuwait and China to continue discussing the issue during the further meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Russia, and also for your helpful comments. I'm starting to see that there's some support for the way forward proposed by Kuwait. I'm going to take some more comments. I see Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. We would like to appreciate the work by the Secretariat to prepare these 4 options. Japan supports option 2. From the viewpoint of cost effectiveness, other options, option 1, 3, and 4, they all involve the huge increase of the core budget and put pressure on the Secretariat operation, which already suffers from large amount of arrears. For this reason, we support option 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I see Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As its first time Saudi Arabia has taken the floor, I would like to thank the government of Republic of Panama for hosting and well-organizing with the CITES Secretariat for the 19th meeting of the parties of CITES, and congratulate you as elected chair of this committee. With regard to document 8, which prepared by the Secretariat at the request of Standing Committee and adopted Decision 18.30 on language strategy for the Convention, the knowledge of the value increase in the number of working language of the Convention by including other languages, and is keen on improving multilingualism within CITES, as it's an important element to improve the implementation of the Convention by all parties. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the language is one of the main and comprehensive factors for the effective implementation of the Convention. We've noticed that one of the obstacles to reach a better implementation of a Convention is the lack of translated documents, and if the translation will be made by each country separately, that may lead to change in the meaning in the wording in each country. We also believe in the importance of this issue, and we support the document with considering the above mentioned and alignment what proposed from Kuwait State. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. I see the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. As it is the first time the United Kingdom is taking the floor, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your election and to express our thanks to the Government of Panama for hosting this COP and for the warm welcome we have received. I would also like to thank the Secretariat for their tireless hard work behind the scenes to make this COP a success. The UK welcomes all efforts to improve the accessibility of the Convention to parties, as this will serve to improve implementation and compliance. We recognise and welcome the steps already taken by parties to translate key documents into Arabic, Chinese and Russian, and note that this remains ad hoc and often on a voluntary basis. We would like to thank the Secretariat for its clear assessment of the implications of expanding the working languages of the Convention, but having considered this carefully, we would have significant concerns with the complete integration of Arabic, Chinese and Russian as working languages of the Convention as laid out under option 1 at this time. The cost is almost twice that of the current triennial spend on language services and will place a considerable burden on the budget without clearly comparable benefits. We would also have concerns about the potential impact of such a significant change on the Secretariat and their ability to deliver existing meeting and language services. If we are to agree a way forward at this meeting, we could potentially support the Secretariat's proposal for the adoption of a limited language strategy supported by extra budgetary funding as laid out in option 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I see the United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, we would like to extend our appreciation and gratitude to the public of Panama on hosting this meeting and welcoming us in such an amazing country. The UAE would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of this document. As an Arabic-speaking nation, we strongly support the addition of Arabic language to the different multilateral environmental agreements. Adding new languages to the conventions ensures the effective engagement from the region that consists of 24 countries using this language. The UAE supports the idea of adding Arabic and other United Nations official languages to their convention, and we believe at this stage we need to further discuss the options presented in the document and its financial implications. Therefore, we also support moving this document to the Finance and Budget Subcommittee to be further discussed there. Thank you.
Thank you, UAE, and I'm starting to hear consistent support for the approach that Kuwait has proposed. I'm thinking of some ways that we can achieve that. I will take a few more party comments and interested particularly if parties have a different strategy or a different view. We're hearing largely support for further discussions and some support for option 2. So I will take Tunisia. Tunisia, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Comme c'est la première fois que la Tunisie prend la parole, je tiens donc à remercier le Panama pour son accueil chaleureux et son hospitalité. Aussi, mes remerciements s'adressent au secrétariat de la CITES pour cette excellente organisation. Merci, Madame la Présidente, et félicitations pour votre élection. Mes remerciements aussi au secrétariat pour la préparation de ce document. La Tunisie soutient fortement l'ajout de la langue arabe aux langues de travail de la Convention, surtout qu'elle aura un effet positif sur l'application de la Convention. De ce fait, la Tunisie soutient la proposition de Koweït. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Tunisia. I will take the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and its member states have understanding for this request and the reasons for its submission. We agree that this is an important discussion and there is a need to improve the linguistic tools and accessibility for parties of the key CITES documents in all 6 UN official languages. However, any such endeavor needs to respect the budgetary constraints, consider the burden on the Secretariat, as well as the possible implications for CITES implementation and enforcement. We consider option 2 to be the most appropriate, as it will most likely lead to better implementation of CITES as documents which are essential to the work of management and scientific authorities will be more widely accessible to officials in their everyday work. We cannot support option 1, 3, and 4 as they have significant budgetary implications. In any case, we are ready to engage further in discussions as suggested by CoP19. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. And finally, I will take Algeria.
Merci Madame la Présidente. L'Algérie remercie le secrétariat pour la préparation de ce document et appuie la proposition du Koweït et soutient pleinement la proposition du rajout de la langue arabe qui semble une nécessité aujourd'hui vu que l'absence des documents de tout type en langue arabe ralentit le fonctionnement de la Convention au niveau des pays arabes. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Algeria. So I had proposed to limit the speakers because I'm hearing quite a bit of support, and I'm hearing support for the strategy that Kuwait has proposed, that we consider this matter more fulsomely in association with the budget working group. So I'm interested to see if anybody opposes that as a way forward. You can see the United States raising their flag. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to support the interventions, particularly from Japan and the United Kingdom. The United States recognizes the benefits of making the convention and its provisions available and accessible to as broad a community as is feasible. However, we cannot ignore the substantial financial and administrative costs associated with adding working languages to the convention. With this in mind, the United States can support option 2. However, we would not support calling it an incremental approach or strategy, as it is not entirely clear what this means or entails. The United States strongly opposes and will not agree to the use of any funds from the General Trust Fund, the core budget, for these purposes. We also would not support the establishment of an in-session working group on this issue, as we have already spent a lot of time on this matter. Finally, the United States agrees with the Secretariat's recommendation that Decision 18.30 be deleted as it has been fully implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. So in general, with some opposition, I have heard that parties are keen to discuss this further alongside the budget working group, so I will just take a moment to confer with the Secretariat so that we're clear on exactly how we're going to do that. Thank you, parties. Thank you, Secretariat. So we have a way forward. So I would like to refer this matter to the Budget Working Group. And from a practical perspective, what we would like to do is have 2 sessions of the Budget Working Group dedicated specifically to discussing this matter that will be, in addition to the members of that working group, open to parties that speak Chinese, Arabic and Russian. So there would be a minimum. We will start with 2 sessions. We will let you know when those are. They will not be today. We will let you know when those are, and the parties that speak those languages will be welcome to join the members of the Budget Working Group to discuss this matter. So I will ask the Budget Working Group, in addition to those parties who wish to join those specific sessions, to formulate a way forward for the implementation of Decision 1830 on a language strategy for the Convention, based on one of the 4 options proposed by the Secretariat, noting that we have heard some support for option 2. So as I said, there will be specific sessions that those parties will be invited to. The Budget Working Group will meet at 1 today and they will discuss when those sessions are. They will not discuss the language strategy. You do not need to come to Budget at 1 o'clock today. The Secretariat has indicated that you are welcome to approach them and indicate your interest in attending those more open sessions of the Budget Working Group, open to the countries that speak these languages, but we will make sure that you know when they are ahead of time. So don't worry, we will endeavour to make sure you're fully informed. So I'm interested if there are any comments further on that way forward. I see that Indonesia still has their flag raised. Indonesia, do you want the floor? No. Okay, thank you, Indonesia. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving the opportunity. Since India has given the floor first time, we would like to congratulate the Chair for your appointment of the committee. Moreover, we would also like to extend our sense of gratitude to Panama for hosting the CITES COP. One point which has not been touched upon is 12.A, which has been mentioned in the document, that inclusion of 3 more languages will also lead to enforcement and processing issues of the CITES permit by the management authorities. So apart from looking into the budgetary provision, we must look into the implementation part of the CITES, especially the enforcement and issuance of the CITES permits and their study, etc., while taking the decision in this matter. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, India. I see the United Kingdom has asked for the floor. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving us the floor again. I think I just wanted to come in and express support, I suppose, for the United States' concerns around this. I think the United Kingdom feels that this is a discussion, a strategic discussion that should take place, and a decision taken in this committee. I feel putting that to the Budget Subcommittee is perhaps a bit unfair on the Budget Subcommittee, when I do believe this is a decision that should be taken in this committee, and the Budget Subcommittee should really be tasked with looking at the implications and how to fund that decision. So we would align with the United States in expressing concern in putting this into that subcommittee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. So noting those concerns, I have indicated the way we will move forward on this. So we will endeavour to inform you about those sessions, and before we conclude this matter, I have seen support for the deletion of decision 18.30. So that is the decision of the committee. Thank you. Okay, committee, I'd like to refer you to CoP19.10 on the CITES strategic vision. This document has been submitted by the Standing Committee, and I'd like to ask the Chair of the Standing Committee to introduce the document. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And while my speaking notes come up, allow me to congratulate you in your election as Chair of this discussion and to congratulate you for your smooth handling of our discussions so far. So I'm referring now to CoP19 Doc 10 on the CITES strategic vision. After the adoption of the CITES strategic vision at COP18, the Standing Committee was tasked with the preparation of new or revised indicators to measure that strategic vision. The Standing Committee established an intersessional working group with Georgia as chair, and my thanks to Georgia, to prepare these indicators, and the results of their work, as approved by the committee, can be found in Annex 2 to document COP19 Doc 10 for adoption by the COP. During the intersessional period, the Standing Committee also considered a report of the Secretariat presenting a comparative analysis in order to illustrate the linkages between the adopted CITES strategic vision and the goals within the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This was in accordance with Decision 18.24. The comparative analysis only focused on the linkages with the SDGs since the Global Biodiversity Framework has not yet been adopted. As a consequence, the Standing Committee is proposing 3 draft decisions requesting the Secretariat to undertake a comparative analysis in order to illustrate the linkages between the CITES Strategic Vision 2021-2030 and highlight areas of alignment 2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as a starting point for an assessment of how CITES can contribute to its implementation and monitoring framework. This analysis would be considered by the Animals and Plants Committees and then by the Standing Committee. And these draft decisions can be found in Annex 1 to document COP19 Doc 10. So, the Conference of the Parties is invited to adopt the decisions on the CITES strategic vision contained in Annex 1 to the document, adopt the indicators for the CITES strategic vision presented in Annex 2, and for the CITES strategic vision presented in Annex 2, and consequently delete Decision 18.24. And I do note that the Secretariat has prepared an addendum and may wish to add additional comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Standing Committee. I would like to ask if the Secretariat would like to add some comments. Thank you, Secretariat. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can see in document COP19 Doc 10, some of the CITES strategic vision indicators are highlighted in blue in Annex 2 to the document have been finalized, but the others in black, the Standing Committee noted that they could possibly warrant further discussion. In order to facilitate the timely adoption of indicators, the Secretariat is proposing in an addendum revised draft indicators for those objectives that are in black. So those that had been agreed by the Standing Committee, we have not touched. These can be found in Annex 1 to the addendum, and in Annex 1 you will also find an attempt by the Secretariat to provide baseline data for each indicator whenever it's available. The changes proposed by the Secretariat aim to avoid duplication of indicators and also to reduce a little bit their number. The Secretariat, in terms of substance, the Secretariat is proposing to keep working on the new indicator for Objective 1.4. Objective 1.4 reads, the appendices correctly reflect the conservation status and needs of a species, and we think this objective is quite fundamental to the Convention. And if parties think further discussion is warranted, the Secretariat proposes in Annex 2 to the addendum a draft decision directing the Standing Committee to continue its work on indicators for that objective. So in short, Madam Chair, the Conference of the Parties is invited to adopt the indicators for the CITES strategic vision. So the only difference compared to the version in the document proposed by the Standing Committee is there's some tweaks to those that were highlighted in black, and also adopt the draft decision in Annex 2 proposing further work on a specific indicator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I'd like to open the floor to parties. I say Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Japan thanks also to the Standing Committee and the Secretariat to preparing this document. Japan supports the recommendations contained in this document. As stated in the document, we believe that mapping the CITES strategic vision against the global biodiversity framework to be adopted at CBD CoP15 next month is very important for the implementation of the strategic vision to contribute to achieving the GBF. In this context, indicators should be aligned between the strategic vision and GBF and should be concise, measurable, with reliable sources of information. As for possible indicators in Annex 2, Indicator 2.3.3 is missing, while its potential sources of information are indicated. Although we understand that this annex was derived from a working document of Standing Committee 74, the Secretariat may clarify the reason for this omission. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I see the United States of America. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States supports adoption of the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to document CoP19 Doc 10 and the draft decision in Annex 2 to document CoP19 Doc 10 Addendum. We support adoption of the indicators presented in Annex 2 to document CoP19 Doc 10 and Annex 2 to the addendum with the following amendments. For Objective 2.2, which is parties cooperate in sharing information and tools relevant to the implementation of CITES, we suggest adding the following indicator. The number of reports shared by parties in compliance with the resolutions of the Convention. For Objective 5.1, parties and the Secretariat support and enhance existing cooperative partnerships in order to achieve their identified objectives. Simply higher counts for the number of consultations, potential indicator 5.1.4, and the number cooperation memoranda of understanding, not agreements, between the Secretariat and other MEAs, which is potential indicator 5.1.5, are not meaningful indicators unless they are more clearly tied to beneficial action for the conservation of CITES listed species. Although we raise concerns regarding simple counts as indicators for Objective 5.1, we think that more broadly, they are often not a good measure of whether the particular objective is being achieved, and we recommend the development of more meaningful indicators where possible. While we support adoption of the potential indicators at the present meeting, we note that there are numerous unresolved questions from the Standing Committee Working Group's discussions, and numerous of the potential indicators would benefit from additional refinement or clarification. For example, with regard to Objective 2.1, parties' non-detriment findings are based on best available scientific information, and their determination of legal acquisition is based on the best available technical and legal information. and potential indicator 2.1.2, the number of written NDFs submitted and posted on the CITES online database. We note that posting NDFs on the CITES online database is voluntary. A simple count of non-detriment findings posted to the database is not a good measure for whether or not findings are based on the best available information. Finally, the United States supports deletion of Decision 18.24, noting that the draft decisions included in Annex 1 to Document 10, if adopted, will continue the comparative analysis and mapping of the CITES strategic vision against the Global Biodiversity Framework once it has been adopted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I see the European Union.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We agree with the Secretariat to delete Decision 18.24 as it has now been completed, and agree that a set of new draft decisions are needed to map our CITES strategic vision to the new post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and contribute to its implementation. We also agree with the Secretariat recommendation on the following draft decisions to be submitted to the Conference of Parties, subject to some addition. 19.AA, directed to the Secretariat. The Secretariat shall undertake a comparative analysis in order to illustrate the linkages between the CITES Strategic Vision 2021-2030 and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as a starting point for an assessment on how CITES can contribute to the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and its monitoring framework, make any recommendations for additional actions as appropriate, and present its analysis and recommendation to the chairs, animals and plant committees, and the Standing Committee. 19.cc, directed to the Standing Committee. The Standing Committee shall review the information provided by the Secretariat in Decision 19AA and the comments made by the chairs of the Animals and Plants Committee according to Decision 19BB, and make recommendations to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. We would like also to propose a new 19BB directed to the chairs of the Animals and Plant Committees as follows. The chairs of the Animals Committee and Plant Committee shall review the information provided in 19AA and make further recommendation to the Standing Committee prior to its review in 19CC. The indicators developed by the working group might be further modified depending on the developments in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, as we all hope will be adopted and approved next month by the CBD CoP19 in Montreal, Canada. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I see Norway.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on your election. Norway thanks also the Standing Committee for the submission of CoP19 Document 10, and we support the adoption of the decisions as found in Annex 1 with the amendments proposed by the Secretariat and the deletion of Decision 18.24. We also support the indicators presented in Annex 2 with the addendum from the Secretariat, and we support the Secretariat's view that this work should be undertaken with a broad framework and should be seen in correlation with CoP19 Document 17.1 on cooperation with organizations and multilateral environmental agreements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norway. I don't see any more parties asking for the floor. I will open the floor to non-parties and to observers. Oh, I see Argentina asking for the floor. Argentina, you have the floor.
Sí, muchas gracias, señora presidenta, por otorgarme la palabra. La delegación argentina concuerda con que la decisión 18.24 puede ser suprimida, ya que ya fue cumplimentada. Con respecto al tema de los indicadores, mucho se ha discutido y, como vemos en el debate actual, todavía requiere más discusión. Por eso la delegación argentina quería proponer la conformación de un grupo de trabajo para poder seguir elaborando el tema de los indicadores. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Argentina, I see Mexico has asked for the floor. Mexico, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Para comentar que México apoya los borradores de decisión del documento para hacer un análisis comparativo de la visión estratégica y el marco mundial de la biodiversidad post-2020 y formular recomendaciones para acciones adicionales. También México ve con buenos ojos el proyecto de decisión incluido en el adendum para que se formulen recomendaciones sobre indicadores nuevos o revisados para el objetivo 1.4, pero propone que esto no sea solo a través de las presidencias de los comités de flora y fauna, sino en consulta con los miembros de ambos comités. Apoyamos algunos indicadores de manera general, pero tenemos varias enmiendas. De abrirse un grupo de trabajo durante la sesión, México participará en él para exponer estas propuestas de enmienda. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mexico. I am going to take 3 more interventions, 1 party and 2 observers. So I'm closing my list because I would like to close this matter before lunch. I've heard general support for deleting decision 1824 and the adoption of the decisions in Annex 1.2, and some interest in potentially amending the indicators. So I will take China, and then I will take CBD and Institute Belliera Jubate, and then I will come back with a plan. Sorry, China, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, to give us the floor. This document concerns the implementation results of the decision 1824 to 1826 on CITES strategic vision. Key considerations of designing assessing indicators include adequacy, ease of measurement, and should not pose an additional reporting burden for the parties. China agrees to adopt the draft decisions on the CITES strategic vision contained in Annex 1 to CoP19 Doc 10 and support deletion of decision 1824 as we think that the work has been completed. Concerning the indicators as presented in Annex 2 to CoP19 Doc 10 and Annex 1 to CoP19 Doc 10 addendum, as a member of the intersessional working group, China was actively involved in the discussions and appreciates efficient and fruitful work, but is concerned that some of the indicators for the CITES strategic vision 2021 to 2030 are vague and subjective. Further, we are concerned that some of the indicators do not include Chinese and non-Western social media platforms. Therefore, China proposes that an in-session working group be established to further refine and define more precisely. We would be pleased to participate if such a working group is formed. As Annex 2 to CoP19 Doc 10 addendum, China would like to support the draft decision with the addition of a requirement for the AC and PC to solicit input and feedback from the parties. Thank you Madam Chair.
Thank you, China. CBD, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So as this is the first time CBD takes the floor, we would like to thank the government of the Panama for the hosting arrangement for the conference and the colleagues from the CITES Secretariat for the preparatory work. The CBD Secretariat recognizes the importance of the effective implementation of CITES strategic vision and considers it as a direct contribution to the success of the future post-2020 global biodiversity framework. We therefore express our full support to the Secretariat of CITES in undertaking the comparative analysis to identify areas of alignment with the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. The future GBF, and particularly its Target 4 on conservation and recovery of species and Target 5 on harvest and trade of wild species, will greatly benefit from the compliance to CITES decisions. And in order to achieve Target 4 and 5, it will require effective and coordinated actions. And for this to occur, we also need better data and information on illegal trade and wildlife conflict. We appreciate the effort of CITES to improve data and information and look forward to continuing to collaborate with you in this regard. However, we also would like to note that the countries consider the GBF as a comprehensive framework, and therefore, while undertaking the comparative analysis, it's important to have a holistic approach to the entire framework, its goals, targets, as well as the monitoring framework. So as CBD CoP19 starts in 3 weeks in Montreal, Canada, with the important task of adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework, we would like to thank the CITES management authorities for providing necessary inputs for the national delegation to the open-ended working group on post-2020. This group will convene its 5th and the final meeting in Montreal prior to the COP, before submitting the final draft of the GBF for adoption. So, Chair, the CBD Secretariat stands ready to provide further information and collaborate on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, CBD. And finally, we have Institute Beliera Jubate. Oh, I'm sorry, we can see. It looks like it's Humane Society International. Do I have that right? All right, thank you very much, Humane Society International.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies, I don't know, my sign says Humane Society International, but I'm not sure how this works. And I am speaking for that organization. And as this is the first time that HSI is taking the floor in this committee, we'd like to congratulate you, Madam Chair, in your election and wish you luck in the oncoming days in this often difficult committee. We recommend that for the indicators listing the number of parties or species or activities, it would be better to have it be the relevant proportion or percentage instead of absolute numbers. Also, as CITES should protect all species affected by unsustainable trade, we recommend that indicator 1.4.1 should reflect the number of species that meet the CITES listing criteria but are not yet included in the appendices. In indicator 1.5.2, the words actions that support sustainable use should be amended to read national conservation actions. This is to ensure that all CITES-related actions are covered, including enforcement matters that might not be considered as supporting sustainable use directly. Indicator 2.1.2 should reflect not just whether NDFs are made, but whether they're based on the best available science and whether they are up to date, preferably not more than 3 years old. In general, we're concerned that there is no independent mechanism for monitoring or evaluating the information and tools listed as indicators here. Anyway, we support further discussion of these issues in a working group, and we would be interested in continuing our participation in such a group should it continue to meet. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Humane Society International. We'll just take a moment with the Secretariat to confer on the way forward. Thank you, everyone. So I am going to establish an in-session working group on this document. It will focus specifically on the indicators for the Strategic Vision 2021-2030 presented in Annex 2, so limited to a discussion on the indicators. It will not focus on indicator 1.4 because we are handling that separately, and I'd also like you to focus on the indicators not already approved by the Standing Committee. And so having said that, I'd like to see members, parties and observers who would like to be members of that working group, if you could press your speaking button now. All right, I'll start by reading parties. Technicians, if there is any parties on the next screen, once I've read through this screen, I'll ask you to scroll for me. So at the moment, for parties, I have Mexico, China, Japan, Argentina, Czech Republic, Ghana, Canada, USA. Technicians, do I have any more screens? No? So those are my parties. For observers, I have what I assume to be the Humane Society International. Oh, sorry, we also have Cambodia. Sorry, I'll go back to parties. Cambodia, India, so I have NRDC, back to the observers, Wildlife Conservation Society, Traffic, WWF, SUCO SA, the AZA, FACE, and Safari Club International Foundation. I also have, if I didn't say India before, I see India and I see Zimbabwe. So those I've read out, you can take your buttons off so we can just check that we've collected everyone. And just to repeat, I do have Argentina and Cambodia on the list. Argentina and Cambodia, you can turn your buttons off if you're happy that I've noted your membership. Thank you. Now I am looking for a chair of this working group, and I'm looking at the United States, given their detailed comments already. The United States, will you chair the working group? Can you give the United States the floor, please, technicians?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll be happy to chair. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. So with that, we have established the working group on the indicators for the strategic vision, and we are right on 12. So we will break for lunch. And sorry, just before I do that, I will just clarify what we've concluded here. So we have concluded that we'll adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1 to this document. We will adopt the decision in Annex 2 of the addendum. And we will delete decision 18.24. All right, thank you very much. We'll break for lunch and we'll be back here at 1:45, please. Prepared to start on document 25, Action Plan on Gender-Related Matters.
And parties, before you leave, please, can I ask you that you take your voting cards with you? Do not leave them in the microphone. Do not forget them. Thank you very much.